Hey everybody, I'm Carol Beth Anderson. You can call me Beth, and this is the second video in a series in which I'm telling you how I use Adobe Audition for audiobook narration. Now, please remember, I'm not an audio engineer. This is just what works for me. What works for you might be different. And also, I'm on a Mac, and so if you're on Windows, there may be some differences, but hopefully this will still be useful to you. In the second video here, we're going to talk about recording, how I record on Adobe Audition using Punch and Roll, and just some tips and tricks that might help you. Let's go into it. Here we are. We are in Adobe Audition, and let's talk about what you need to do to effectively record for audiobooks. First of all, let me show you over here on the right side of the screen. You're going to see this little magnet and this other little thing. I'm not actually sure what it's supposed to be. But the little thing that is selected right now is for auto-scrolling. You do want that to be selected when you're recording. The magnet is for what's called snapping, and I like for that to be selected when I'm recording as well. And I'll explain a little bit more about that later. So I like to have both of those selected for recording. Sometimes they will turn themselves off. Presumably I'm hitting something that turns them off, but I don't know what. So if something's going wrong, sometimes you just need to turn one of those back on. Auto scroll just makes it so that the screen automatically moves as you're listening to something, and that's a nice thing. So if the screen is not moving as you're listening to your audio, that's what you need to turn on. Again, we'll talk about snapping in a few minutes. Okay, here we are. You've got a WAV file that you have saved already in waveform view, and if you don't know how to do that, make sure you watch the first video in this series. So let's assume that you've started with this WAV file. Now we need to set up Punch and Roll. Punch and Roll recording, we're not going to get into the details about what it is. Please watch the bajillion other YouTube videos about that if you're not sure what Punch and Roll is. But these days, Punch and Roll is pretty much industry standard when you're working on audiobooks. It's the opposite of what's called open roll. And all that it means is that you are correcting your mistakes as you go instead of leaving them in the audio file. Alrighty, come down here where you see the little red button. That's your record button. We're going to right-click on that. And there are a couple of things you need to select. The first is Punch and Roll mode. Make sure that is selected. It'll go away once you select it, so right-click on it again. And you want Overwrite selected. Now, there might be times when you need to change that to Insert, and you can when you need to, and we'll talk about that later, like when we talk about how to do pickups. But for now, let's have Overwrite selected. The other thing that you might want to do is go to Adobe Audition, Settings, Playback and Recording. Down here where it says Punch and Roll, you need to decide what your pre-roll duration is. We may have talked about this in the last video too, but let's hit it again. So in Punch and Roll, you always will have a pre-roll. It will play a little bit of what you just recorded before you start recording again when you punch back in. And so I like a short pre-roll of 2 seconds, but you may want to click on that and enter a different number like 4 seconds or 5 seconds. All right, now we're set up. I believe Audition already comes with the Z shortcut for recording. So when you're ready to record, go ahead and click Z. And I'm going to record some stuff that I hope is going to have a lot of flaws in it that we can later fix in editing. So just know I'm going to do a poppy P, and I'm going to do probably some hissy S's and lots of mouth noises and things like that, because I want to give us some good stuff to fix when we're going through the editing videos later. Here we go. Pop, pop, pop. Steam, steam, smart. And I've got some mouth noises. This is going to be the worst audio ever. Alrighty. And let me do some big breaths. And then let's do some little breaths. And we'll talk a little bit. And another little breath. Okay, that gives us some good stuff to play with. Let me look at my list of what we're going to talk about in editing later. Oh, let's do a clothing sound. All right, we got some clothing sound happening there. Okay, there's some great stuff we can get rid of later. I'm going to stop this recording, and to do that, all I do is hit the space bar. All right, we've got a recording here. Now, we're going to talk in a minute about what Audition does with like zooming. It's pretty annoying, but we'll get to that in a minute. I'll just start out by telling you that your first recording, whether that is a minute long like mine is, or 5 seconds long, or 16 minutes long, Audition, once you're done with it, will put it all onto one screen. So it'll zoom it so that all of that is on one screen when you first start a file. Just FYI. We'll get to that in a second. All right, so let's say that I didn't like this last part that I recorded, and I need to redo it. So, in fact, we really do need to talk a little bit about zooming right here because we're going to talk about how to punch in cleanly. So let's talk about zooming first because we're going to need this for punching in cleanly. There are various ways to zoom in and out in Adobe Audition. So, like I said, when you start, it's going to put that entire audio for what you just recorded all onto one screen. I don't really like to have a minute's worth of audio in one screen. It's just a lot of audio and I can't really see a lot of details. So there are different ways to zoom in. First of all, you've got this whole scroll bar here at the top. You can grab one end of it and move it. So I'm moving it over here and we're just seeing the audio at the end on the right-hand side of the track. You can also grab it. You see that little hand? Click and grab it to move around. You can grab the other end and zoom out that way. So that's one way to zoom. You also can zoom just with your touchpad if you have one. So I'm zooming in and then out with my touchpad. That tends to be a little bit not as accurate as I would like, but sometimes it's a quick, nice way to do some zooming. And then there's the keyboard shortcuts, which I just recently have started using because I like how accurate and easy they are. So you can zoom out with the minus button. Click it as many times as you want. You can even hold it down like I'm doing. Or you can zoom in with the plus button. I'm going to hold it down and do some zooming in. Pretty cool, right? All right, now I'm going to grab up here, drag this to the end, and decide where we want to punch in. Let me do some listening here. And to do that, all I do is hit the space bar. Okay, let's say that I wanted to say that part a little bit differently. And so let's say we want to punch in right before what I just did, where it says... And to do that, okay, let's say we want to punch in right before that. So we've got a breath here. We're going to talk about breaths in a future video. This is what breaths generally look like. They're fuzzy, they're usually kind of light colored, and I'm looking down here at the bottom part of the screen. That's what a breath looks like. I can't really see the breath on the waveform, but I can see it down here in the spectral frequency view. I should put that in my warm-ups. That's kind of a tongue twister. Spectral frequency view. And so the big thing is that you want to punch in when you're doing punch and roll. You want to punch in before or after one of these breaths. If there's a breath at your punch-in point, you need to do it before or after. Because let me show you what happens if we punch in the middle of a breath. All right, I'm going to click Z because that is my keyboard shortcut for record, and it works for punch and roll too. Of later. I'm going to stop this recording. What happens? Okay, let me show you what just happened. Recording. It just cut my breath in half, and it sounds really artificial. I'm going to do Command Z to undo that and show you one other thing that can happen if you punch in the middle of a breath. Of later. I'm going to stop this recording. Okay, I went ahead and did another breath there, but now I've got this partial breath connected with another breath, and it sounds weird. It sounds like two breaths put together because that's what it is. I didn't breathe exactly the same both times. So we just don't want to punch in the middle of a breath, and this is why I absolutely love spectral frequency view for punch and roll, because I can see my breaths so clearly in a way that it's hard to do in waveform without zooming way in. And when you zoom way in, you lose some of the other good information in the waveform. So I'm going to undo my punch and roll again there. And here's what I'm going to do. I usually like to punch in before a breath. You may prefer to do it after, and that's totally fine too. But I usually like to do it before. So you can grab this playhead up here. You can move it exactly where you want it. You also can just click wherever you want to be. And the reason we have this snapping on, the thing that looks like a magnet, is because it will help us. It kind of helps you get to a place that's like in between sounds. Snapping kind of seeks out the edges, if that makes sense. So it'll kind of help you click in between sounds. I hope that makes sense. But you also can drag this to put it exactly where you want it to be. I'm a little hoarse today, by the way. Sorry about that. I'm glad I'm not recording today. I mean, I'm recording this, but I'm not recording a book today. Okay, so I've got it right before my breath. And what I like to do with punch and roll, and I've heard this tip from others, is I like to read along with the pre-roll to get my voice kind of so that I'm talking the same way that I did before, and it keeps it really nice and smooth so I don't have a big break between the two segments and it sounds like it was all one segment. The big thing, though, is I've got this playhead so close to the end of what I was saying before, I just try not to, whatever my pre-roll is, I try not to extend my repetition of the pre-roll beyond the playhead. Let me show you what I mean by that. First of all, let me just hear what this pre-roll is going to be. I'm going to stop this recording. Okay, that's what my pre-roll is going to be. So let's try this and I'll show you what I mean. Rid of later. I'm going to stop this recording. Okay, I wasn't quite on, and now it says recording ding. So you have to be really careful, and sometimes I will even, as I'm reading along with the pre-roll, I'll kind of stop reading just a split second before the end of it to make sure that I don't go past it when I'm reading along. So let's listen again to what it was that I wanted to say again, because I don't remember. And to do that, all I do is hit the space bar. Okay, that's what I wanted to say. Here we go. Let's try this. Rid of later. I'm going to stop this recording. And to do that, all I have to do is hit the space bar. I'm going to stop this recording. And to do that, all I have to do is hit the space bar. Okay, not too bad. It sounds similar. I don't think I went quite as far as last time, so I will delete that. And there we go. We've got a recording, and I've taught you how to use punch and roll. So the big thing with punch and roll, with getting it placed in the right place, is watching for those breaths and not punching in the middle of a breath or the middle of another sound. Usually you're going to punch in between phrases rather than like in between words, and it just makes for a smoother sound in the end. That is punch and roll. I hope it makes sense. We've talked about zooming in and out. And to continue with this video on recording, I want to talk about how I create character files. And I always have a character reference file as if I'm recording fiction where I've got various characters. So let's do a fake little conversation here. All right, we're going to punch and roll. Let me make sure that I'm punching in at a good spot. I am, and here we go. Fake conversation coming up. All I have to do is hit the space bar. I can't believe you did that, she said. I don't actually like that. Let's try it again. All I have to do is hit the space bar. I can't believe you did that, she said. Well, I don't know. I actually thought it would be a good thing, he replied. You left my cat outside when it was raining. She hates the rain. Well, I just thought maybe she would like it. She might want to get used to it. All I have to do is hit the spacebar. I can't believe you did that, he said. What are you talking about? What did I do this time? You got Jif peanut butter when I asked for Skippy. I don't even like peanut butter. All I have to do is hit the spacebar. I can't believe you did that, he said. What did I do this time? You got Jif peanut butter instead of Skippy. I don't even like peanut butter. Okay, so we've got a little conversation here, and I'm going to show you what I would do when I'm first using these characters. First of all, when I first start a book, I would start a new file called, let's say the book is called The Book. So my acronym for it is TB. TB characters. All right, I'm going to save that. Go ahead and just save it on the desktop. I can't believe you did that, he said. Okay, that's the first time this guy talked. Let's say his name is Jim. I would select it. Sometimes I'll select a little bit of space on either side. Copy it, so that would be Command-C, or you can go up to Edit, Copy. Don't cut it, just copy it. Go to your character file, and we're going to paste it in. Command-V or Paste. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a marker before it and label it so that I know who this is. Let's click over on markers over here. So I'm going to put a marker. Marker is M on your keyboard. I'm sure there's a place to find it up here. I just don't know where it is. Oh, I think you can actually hit it here. Add Q marker. Look at that. I always just use M. And then I'm going to click a couple times on the name of it, and I'm going to put Jim. All right, let's go back over here. What did I do this time? All right. Let's name her Penelope. Got Jim and Penelope. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to go back over here and paste it. After Jim, I'm going to put another marker, M, and name this one Penelope. Maybe Jim and Penelope don't even come back into the book until 4 chapters later, and I don't remember what voices I heard. So I always keep this file open. I'm saving it. And later on, when I'm recording a chapter and I'm like, what did Jim sound like? What voice did I give him? All I do is I go back here. You can even sort your markers by name if you'd like to. So I can have them alphabetized. I'm going to double click on Jim. It's going to get me to him, and I'm just going to listen. I can't believe you did that. Oh, that's the voice I gave Jim, and then I can stay consistent throughout the book. So that's how you create a character file. And you just keep adding more and more characters to this file and more markers. All right, one more tip. Let's say that you need to shut down your computer or whatever, and you don't want, let's say you've got these 2 files open and maybe even more files open, and you don't want to have to go hunt down all of those files next time you're opening up Audition. You want them to all be there waiting for you at once. Now, I told you we're not really going to be using multitrack here, but I'm going to show you something I do use multitrack for regularly. I'm going to create a multitrack file. Don't worry, you don't have to know how multitrack works for this at all. This is just a little hack to keep all of our files together. So I'm going to go to File, New Multitrack Session, or Command-N, and I'm just going to name it, let's name it TB Multitrack. Because TB is the book, remember? I'm going to put it on my desktop. I don't normally save stuff on my desktop. I save it within Dropbox. Just make sure you're backing up. Dropbox is how I back up. I'm going to say OK. And here's the cool thing. When I have this multitrack session, don't worry about it. You can click out of it. You can double click on one of these files. Let's go back to our original file. That multi-track session assumes that every other file that's open is part of the multi-track session. Again, you don't really have to know how that works. Let me just show you what happens when we close all of these files. I make sure they're all saved. I can tell they are because if they're not, they would have an asterisk next to them. In Audition, the asterisk means it's not saved. They're all saved. I'm going to go ahead and select them all. The way I do that is I select one of them and then I hold down the Shift button until the end of the list and it selects all of them. So I hold down the Shift button and click the last item on the list. Then they're all selected. I'm going to right click and click Close Selected Files. So I'm going to close all 3 of those files. And then let's pretend I closed Audition, maybe even shut down my computer. I'm opening up Audition again. I'm going to go up to File, Open Recent, TB Multitrack. If you can't find it, just find it wherever you saved it. You can just go to Open and you would be able to find it there. So let's go to Desktop. It will be, multitrack stuff is always in a folder, so we're going to open that up and click on tbmultitrack.sesx. And check it out. Both of our files we were working with both open along with that multitrack file because they're attached to it. So I always keep a multitrack file open because it means that I can keep whatever files I want to open up all at once. I just make sure they're all open when I close Audition and when I close that multitrack file, and then they'll be waiting for me when I open up the multitrack file again. So that's it. That's recording on Adobe Audition. If you have any questions, let me know. Have fun recording. Our next video will be on metadata and exporting your files. So just know that's what our next video will be on. The first 3 videos are really for anybody who's recording audiobooks and not necessarily editing and mastering. After the first 3 videos, we will have mastering and editing videos coming up too. Thanks for listening.